It was built in the 80s and is said to have cost $100 million at that time. Many parts of the building were built with pure liquid gold. It belongs to late Alhaji Mai Deribe, a wealthy businessman and philanthropist who passed away in 2002. The structure is currently uninhabited and is standing gloriously in Maiduguri, Borno State.
Wait, did you hear that? This man spent $100 million, the equivalent of like $1 billion now, I can guess, building the most expensive house in the whole of Africa or the whole world. And just a decade or two after he's dead, nobody inhabits the house. It has turned to a museum. Many houses now are museums because the people that built it did not know that the times have changed. Your children will not live in the house you're building now. Even you, when you're going to live, how long are you going to live on the house? Why are you committing so much resources building a house? It's outdated. I'll tell you why. But first of all, do you know that your children will not even grow in the same city as you are now? Those your little kids you're seeing now, once they are up to, let's say 12, they will go to secondary school somewhere else. And then university, some other city. And then they try to build their life anywhere else. Some will travel out of the country you are currently in. Do you know that? So what's the use of your house? You know, when you're young, you need to be careful where you're committing your resources. Very careful. You know, the reason most people build houses is as a retirement plan. I understand, if that's why you're building. But you have to be careful not to build too big of a house because nobody's going to live there after you're dead. You know what I'm saying? Even some old people are not living in their house because they are too old. Their children will take them to another country where the children are staying. Who stays in the house? Go and check P Square's father's house or P Square's house in the village. Somebody did a video the other day. Nobody was there. Big mansion, big compound, some dilapidated cars and stuff. Nobody's there. If I was there 20 years ago telling P Square don't build a house, it would be like I'm crazy. Where's P Square living now? In Lagos. His wife is living in the US. So his kids won't even grow in the house he bought in Lagos. It shock you. House is an old, outdated asset. If you put it that way, you know, means of living is outdated. Building your own house. Do you understand? Owning your own house. Except you're doing it for investment, financial investment. You buy some properties, you sell off. It's understandable. But if you are trying to commit, the big reason is that in the olden days, people don't travel as much. Do you understand? The house my grandfather built is still there now. Still standing strong. And I can guarantee you that his own grandfather would have even lived around that place. So they will not live. So when they want to build a house, they build a house that will last hundreds of years. You know what I'm saying? So those days, they will just have a house. They'll have farms around it. Do you understand? And then they have a forest down like a mile or two away where they go for hunting. And the man can live his whole life there. The children will inherit the house and then live their whole life there. And then the grandchildren, like that for generations. If you go to certain countries, it's just in Africa, we like to destroy our heritage. You know what I'm saying? If you go to certain countries, you will see houses that have been standing there. Do you know the Hagia Sophia? Hagia Sophia is a church. It's a church in Istanbul, Turkey. It has now been converted to a mosque. It has been standing there for more than 1,000 years. Do you understand? So when these people, some white people will tell you that this house was bought by their ancestor, they are still living in the same house. But we in Africa, things have changed so much for us. Cities, new cities have popped up in other places where people from the villages are migrating to the cities. And then in the next future, another city will come up. What we have is democracy. Democracy ensures that a new president emerges every 4 to 8 years. And this new president will develop a new part of the country. So there's a whole lot of movement. And then there's this whole immigration thing. Once somebody graduates from the university, the next thing is they're abroad. Do you understand? So there's a whole lot of differences in our generation versus our grandfather's generation that we don't need to be spending money on certain things. House is largely useless to own if you don't know it now. Except you're about to retire or you're heading towards retirement and you don't have a place and you know that you need to be paying rent, you know? Then you can put maybe 2 rooms, 3 rooms. Even 3 rooms is too big. Do you understand? Don't overcommit your youthful resources to building a house. Nobody will live there after a few years. Nobody, even you. The moment you start building a house, you are tied to that house. Some people, see what happens to some people. They will live in a certain city that is different from their village. So they will now hear, oh, you are not supposed to build a house in that city because the owners of the city might take it one day. So they go to the village and start building a house. Then they realize that every few months they have to be traveling back to the village to complete the house, to add extra few blocks and add the roofing and everything. And then they realize, oh, this is too stressful. I'm never going to live here until the next 20, 30 years when I'm retiring. So they pause it. Now the house is dilapidated. They go to the town and start building another one. By the time they're finishing that building of that house, that retirement age have come. Now, where do they live? Do they go back to complete the one in the village? Or do they stay in that one in the city? It happens to people abroad. It's not just Africa. Some people will go and start paying mortgage, trying to tie them. When you start paying mortgage, you have tied yourself to that house. I know many people will be thinking about, why can't you rent it out or lease it out? Yeah, if you can do that, do that. But if you're trying to own a house as a young person, it ties you down. And as a young person in your life, if you're really trying to acquire wealth, you will change cities many times. Do you understand? You will move around different countries. There's many investments you have to risk. When you're young, if you want to get rich, you have to take a big risk with money. Calculated risk, oh, no mumu, not betting, not all those gambling. Do you understand? Once you assemble your forces, you call on your comrade, you commit financial resources. You can't do that if something is taking that money, and it could be a house. A house could take your financial resources for 10 to 20 years just for you to complete it. Think about it. So be careful of owning houses. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying if you're trying to own a house now as a young person, think about it. Who's going to live in that house? Of what use is it? Where you're building the house, will it be easy to resell? There's a guy that has been telling me to help sell their house for almost 2-3 years now. Every 2 months he's contacting me. Have you found a buyer? I'm not a real estate. I'm not finding a buyer. They have a 4-story building. They need to sell it. But it's in a place that nobody wants to buy. The tenants, how much are the tenants paying? A meager, how much? Do you understand? So there's a problem with owning a house, and our times have changed. Generations have changed. You need to wake up.